Hi, Heather Bessler.
Hello, Council President.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Before I call you Ms. Bessler, I just want to make sure your pronouns she, her.
Yes, they are.
All right.
Thank
Don't
you.
want to assume. You bet. Excited? This is like one of our, nerd favorite moments of the year.
I'm glad to hear that.
I always tell people like I've heard this presentation many times and every year I learn something new still. So it's always good stuff.
Great. I have my colleague Luis Rosario with me this time. I know he'll give some amazing information as well.
Is Mr. Rosario like your safety net or is he co-presenting?
He's co-presenting. He's the county assessor.
Yep.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Nice to see you.
Yeah.
All right. It looks like we have a council here. I'm just gonna take one moment to adjust my meeting screen a little bit, and then we will start. I just covered over my picture and it said "Spotlight Me." I'm glad nobody uses that button during the me spotlight me. Maybe it meant just for myself, but. All right, so Sherry, you have us recording?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so. All right, looks good. All right, we will call the meeting of the St. Paul City Council to order. Roll call.
Prince.
Here.
Tao.
Here.
Tolbert.
Here.
Yang.
Here.
Jalali.
Here.
Naker.
Here.
Council President Brenmon.
Here.
7 present, no one absent.
Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Consent agenda items 5 through 13 are before you for your consideration.
Right. Is anything from consent that should be taken separately? Seeing none, Ms. Yang moves consent agenda. Any discussion? Roll call.
Prince.
Aye.
Tao.
Aye.
Tolbert.
Yes.
Yang.
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Naker.
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The consent agenda is adopted. Item 14 is a staff report on the 2022 property tax trends by Ramsey County.
Right. And I was saying before the meeting started, this is my the nerd side of me special favorite day of the year when we really dig into how we property tax and the property tax trends for 2020. Always very informative. There's always a nugget I pick up from this presentation, even though I believe this will be the 10th time I've heard it, maybe the 9th. And it's exciting today because Heather Bessler is joining us for the first time in this role. So she will be presenting with our County Assessor, Luis Rosario. So welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you here and we look forward to your presentation.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, council members. Luis Rosario, Ramsey County Assessor. Thank you for taking the time to have me come in and give you an update.
Thank you for having me. I'm Heather Bessler, the Ramsey County Auditor and Treasurer. Thank you for having us today. Council President and council members. Happy to present on the trends affecting values and property taxes for payable 2022. Today's presentation will consist of a real quick overview of who determines your property taxes, and then Mr. Rosario will present on the 2021 assessment for pay 2022 taxes. We'll move into a quick discussion about property tax regressivity and the property tax refund. Mr. Rosario will then present on the new development and give a market summary for this year's values. And then I will finish up the presentation and discuss the payable 2021 property tax collections, payable 2022 property tax estimates. So with that, we will move into the presentation. The first quick part of our presentation is just a high-level overview on who determines property taxes in the state of Minnesota. Property taxes start with the Minnesota State Legislature. That is the governing body that determines the overlaying tax policy that dictates how properties are assessed and how they are ultimately taxed in Minnesota. The state legislature establishes the property classes. In Minnesota, there's approximately 52 property classifications. Fun fact, we're the state with the most property tax classifications in the United States. The state legislature also establishes the class rates for all those property classifications, determines the levels of state aid, so local government aid, county program aid. They also determine mandates that they hand down to local governments. And then they also levy the state business tax on commercial, industrial, and seasonal residential recreational properties.
Is there such thing as a funded mandate ever, or not really? No. I noticed you wrote underfunded, not unfunded, but it made me wonder if there's ever a funded mandate. Who knows?
Council President, every once in a while there is a funded mandate, but the majority of them are underfunded.
Gotcha.
So the county assessor's section has already taken place. Our assessed value has been set as of January 2nd of 2021. Value notices were mailed out in March, and property owners have had really multiple appeal opportunities. They still have one more appeal opportunity, and that's to go to Minnesota Tax Court, and they would have to appeal, file with Minnesota Tax Court by April 30th of 2022. At this point, the market value should be pretty close to where we end up with our taxes when the taxes are extended. There may be a few changes there, but not too many. And then in the taxing jurisdiction, that's really where we're at with the process right now. Mayors are announcing their proposed levies, the county manager as well, school districts, and then the city councils and county commissioners will take action, and the final levy will be approved at the end of the year. Next slide. So on page 4, this is the historical value spreadsheet that shows the counties at an all-time high with their assessment at 62.2 billion. That is 12.5 billion from that 2007 high point. The city of St. Paul, I just broke it out as 30.1 billion, which is 6.6 billion from the 2007 high point. The assessment again this year was based on 2020 sales and 2020 market data. It was during the COVID pandemic. As of January 2nd of 2021, the data shows really a modest assessment this year, with most property types going up, and with commercial properties value staying relatively flat. I do want to point out that there was a really significant difference between the 2007 Great Recession and today's current market conditions. 2007 recession was brought on by the subprime mortgage market and the lax lending standards that led to the collapse of the mortgage industry, resulting in significant financial imbalance. It took 12 years to reach a new high in our assessment, which happened in 2017. However, there are still some properties in St. Paul that still today property values have not fully recovered from the effects of the 2007 Great Recession. The 2020 recession, with what we're currently dealing with today, was caused by a public health crisis, the pandemic. Today's conditions really have not affected the residential market as it did in 2007. The real estate market was booming before the pandemic hit, and the strength of that market thus far has really helped it withstand the COVID-related challenges it faces. Most impacted by the current pandemic are those property owners that worked in the service and hospitality industry that may have been laid off, and some sectors of the commercial market, again, in the service and hospitality industry. Next slide, please. So on page 5, this really compares our 2007 median value to our 2021 median value. As I mentioned earlier, we still have some neighborhoods that haven't fully recovered, and if you see that north end is in red there, it's still it's almost there. It's a minus 0.69% that needs still, the median value hasn't still recovered. But this year, Payne, Phelan, Thomas Dale, Dayton's Bluff, and the West Side recovered this assessment year. So these neighborhoods, which had many of our people of color that are homeowners, may not have had the opportunities in the past to take advantage of refinancing at historically low interest rates because they didn't have enough equity in their homes. I will say in these areas, you're seeing the most. You're seeing multiple bid situations if they put their homes up for sale. This is the most affordable housing stock in the 7-county metro area. So many of our property owners are relieved to see their values finally bounce back, but they're very concerned about the increase in property taxes that come with it. And as you know, property tax can be very regressive by nature. And the other thing I wanted to point out here is if you look at McAllister, Groveland, and Highland, these neighborhoods are well over 20% from that 2007 peak. Their values really held well during the 2007 recession. Next slide, please. So this is really the 2021 assessment. So looking at how values changed by class and then broken down by the city of St. Paul, suburbs, countywide, and aggregate change. Overall, countywide, we're at 3.5%. Last year's assessment was 8.1. And you can see the details from the suburbs and city above. Residential is at 3.4, countywide, commercial flat at 0.4, industrial steady at 4.5, and apartment market has been very resilient. It's at 5.7. If we compare the city and the suburbs, St. Paul is slightly higher on the residential side than the suburbs. Commercial stayed relatively flat on both ends. Some of the commercial properties that really were impacted by the pandemics are like restaurants, hotels, certain retails, office, fitness centers really were impacted by the pandemic. But there were still some properties on the commercial side that increased, such as grocery stores, big boxes, some medical offices. Industrial up 10.7% this year in the city of St. Paul. A really strong demand because of the e-commerce and its centrally located areas near to freeway in St. Paul. And finally, apartments experienced more growth in the suburbs, both than St. Paul, but both are very healthy increases. We're at 4.7 in St. Paul and the suburbs 7.4. Next slide, please. So what I wanted to give you an idea is how values, single family values have really gone up in the last 5 years. So looking at single family median values from 2017 to 2021, the percentages in red are the top 5 increases for each year. And then the column on the far end is just comparing 2017 cumulative to 2021. So for example, if we look at Dayton's Bluff, in 2017, a median value single family home in Dayton's Bluff was $117,500. It is now in 2021, $177,500. That's 51.1% increase over a 5-year span. Same, if we could just go to Payne Phelan, 133,200. It is now 194,700. That's a 46% increase over that span. Thomas Dale, if I give you one more, 111,200 at 173,000. That's a 56% increase. I do want to point out the downtown one is the increases there were because these are single family homes, and in downtown, the Muni 17 map goes across 35E by Children's Hospital, and there was some new construction homes there. So that growth was more because of new construction and not the market. But you can see that the affordable housing stock in St. Paul is really going down, and there's a really strong need for affordable housing. And the gap, the affordable gap for home ownership, especially first-time homeowners, and especially people of color, just continues to widen. Next slide.
Okay, just a quick discussion on property tax regressivity, as Director Rosario mentioned in one of his previous slides. Property tax is inherently regressive. What this means is that property tax is assessed regardless of the income of the homeowner. So right now, and with the current market, the areas where there's more market competition due to affordable housing stock demand, they're seeing a higher 4-year trend increase in their values. This results in these homeowners and subsequently the renters who are paying the property taxes through their rent feeling a compounded effect of the regressivity and of the values rising at a higher rate than other areas. There are a few programs, though, that help fight this regressivity, and I just want to take a quick moment to highlight the property tax refund. The property tax refund is really an underutilized program. This directly offsets the property taxes that homeowners and renters pay. There's 3 types of property tax refund. In Ramsey County, this slide specifically displays the refund utilization rate for Ramsey County residents for 2018, which is the most recent year available for this data. And the Department of Revenue estimates that only 2/3 of homeowners claim the homestead refund. What this means is that $25 million in additional refunds for homesteads goes unclaimed for Ramsey County residents. So looking at this chart, you can see that for the average amount of refund between a homestead credit refund and the special refund, it's about $1,200, which is equal to those federal stimulus checks that residents receive. So it's a lot of money that's being left on the table right now.
And Ms. Bessler, this is something that we mention every year, but it seems like Ramsey County in particular is in a more aggressive, and I say that in a good way, position these days in terms of tackling these issues. And I think if we dug in a little bit deeper, we'd see that the 1/3 of the folks that are not applying for homestead credit refunds are probably in those 4 areas that you pointed out on the slide previously. And any efforts that we could work with the county, and I don't even bother to say the state because I think then it turns into some sort of political volleyball, but to get the word out in a door-to-door manner, in a just in a creative manner to get homeowners, which in those areas also isn't necessarily, a large amount of the properties, the information about how to apply since they cannot do it automatically when they fill out their taxes. I mean, it's a second step, would be appreciated. And any advice you have to that end, because I know that there's a proposal in the budget, Mayor Carter's budget, that includes something similar to a property tax refund for homeowners in income qualifying. And it seems similar to this, and I'm wondering if we could kill 2 birds with 1 stone and instead just get folks to apply to the state program. And I'd appreciate any thoughts you have on that. I also realized that while I've been talking, other hands popped up, and I don't know if I missed that earlier or, but I see Ms. Prince, Ms. Jalali, and Ms. Yang. So I don't know. Why don't I go to Ms. Prince? I think your hand was up at first, and I just want to I do want to hear some reaction to that, Ms. Bessler, and see if you have any suggestions on where we could go with that. Ms. Prince.
Thanks, Council President Brenmoen, and I agree with you. So the 25 million in additional refunds is in Ramsey County, is that right?
Councilmember Prince, yes, the 25 million is specifically related to homesteaders in Ramsey County.
That is very concerning. And I do know one thing that you do is that you put the flyer in with our tax bills, our tax estimates. And I have every year pulled that out and mean to post it on Facebook for my constituents to make sure they look at it, to make sure they seek, especially, you know, a lot may know about the homestead credit, but the special refund is something that I believe is relatively new. And my question is this special homeowner refund being offered because we used to calculate limited market value so that people didn't have to pay taxes based on the full increase in their property value. Do you know about that? Because I think we did away with limited market value about probably 5 or 8 years ago. And it made everyone's taxes go up. And I'm just thinking, if so many people qualified for it, it seems like there should be some way that it is automatically calculated, because that is one that does not rely on your income at all. It is based on how much your taxes have gone up. So I put that out there. If the limited market value issue is not related to this, then feel free to not answer that question. But I just don't understand with the special property tax refund why the state is not just giving people that based on the amount that their taxes are going up. It just seems so unfair that people have to figure out how to apply for it.
Thank you, Council President Brenmoen and Councilmember Prince. I'm unsure on the relationship between the abolishment of the limited market value provision and the special property tax refund. I can look into that and get you that information. I'd be happy to do that. The special property tax refund that you referred to, you're correct in that it isn't related to homeowner income. It's directly related to the amount that homeowners' property taxes went up. So the threshold is if property taxes went up by 12% and the increase was at least $100, then the homeowner qualifies to receive that special property tax refund.
Thank you. Ms. Jalali and then Ms. Yang.
Thanks. Mine is more just a short reaction at, I think the last slide said 34 million in unclaimed refunds for renters, and find that really staggering. And that average refund of a 732 payment, that's, you know, half to most of the way of rent for a lot of renters. And just makes me think about what we could do to get the word out more, that that's something that people can take advantage of, and that that's really important. A lot of community education work to happen in the coming cycle. So just wanted to note that and appreciate this information.
And just clarifying that, I'm not sure I heard you correctly, but the renter refunds, it's not 34 million unclaimed. That's how much refund there is available. Ms. Bessler, can you clarify that chart?
Council President, you're correct. The chart displays how many refunds have been claimed. So this is for the homestead refund, the renter refund, and the special refund. This is what was claimed by residents for the 2018 refund. It's unknown how much is unclaimed specifically for the renter refund, because that's calculated on the certificate of rent paid that's supplied to renters at the beginning of each year. And they have to supply that to the Department of Revenue for that calculation. But it's estimated that the utilization rate on that is lower than what it is for the homestead refund.
Sorry for the misunderstanding. I really appreciate the clarification, and thanks, Council President Brenwan, for catching that. I would be very interested what that total eventually is of what is unclaimed, and think the point about community education is still shared work we can do. So thank you, and sorry again. Good to have this info.
Ms. Yang.
Thanks. I wanted to chime in and share my frustration around this as well, and knowing that like $25 million that should be in the hands of people aren't in their hands. And that is a lot of money for me personally. Like I know I've had to help family members this past year in getting their homestead credit refunds, and they've been basically overpaying in taxes for like over a decade now, and there also isn't a way to do back pay for folks who are in this situation too, where they haven't been getting their refunds. And so I feel like we are beyond this conversation around outreach. Like we really need to push for a way to make these payments be granted to people automatically to simplify the system here, because this makes me think a lot about families who have a lot of barriers to, let's say, language. They don't have folks who work at the city government who know about these type of things, or don't have family members who can, educate them about these refunds. And basically, they're losing money because of that. And many of these people, I'm sure, are working class families and families who are struggling. And so I can't even emphasize like how important it is for this to be looked at, and for us to reevaluate how this is done, because this is really unjust to a lot of people. And I really feel for those families, because they are the ones who really need these refunds as well. And so I think like I would really love to hear, what the county is doing around this in terms of a conversation and trying to implement change around it. Would any of you be able to share a bit more about that?
Sure, Council President, Council Member Yang. As we looked at this information this year, this is an astonishing number, and we're looking to right now we're working on formulating a plan on how we can get the word out. Community engagement work we can do. There are already existing programs at the county that we're looking at leveraging for community engagement around this. Other ideas is we can have hosting workshops, working with community for how to fill out the property tax refund, have interpreters available, and then social media campaigns. I definitely welcome any involvement that the city would like to have with this. I think it's going to take cross-county collaboration to make sure that we're getting the word out to our residents properly.
And Ms. Besler, I appreciate that, Bessler. I appreciate that that answer, and really I appreciate that Ramsey County is, like I said, taking a more aggressive posture and really looking into these things, because we've had this conversation for 10 years, and then probably 30. but I know that the program has changed over time, but I'm sure this result has has been a continued problem. So I think on the outreach level, any way that we can work in partnership with Ramsey County, this looks like this on council would be interested in collaborating with. And then I would additionally say to my colleagues, two things. One is I will carry this forward to the League of Minnesota Cities and try to encourage them to add it to their legislative agenda. And I think that as the city of St. Paul and city of Ramsey County, and perhaps the school district, add it to our legislative agendas and as part of GIPTAC, and something that we're actively pursuing at the state legislature, some sort of passive homestead credit refund, as opposed to something where you have to file a second paper. It seems like it should just be part of the regular taxes that you're filing. And sometimes these programs, by design, seem to be exclusive. So, and what we can do on a policy side, I think we can commit to doing as well in terms of getting this on our legislative agendas and bringing it to our other commissions and bodies. Ms. Yang, your hand is still up. Did you have a further question?
Yeah, I do have another question.
Yep.
Can you share what happens to those dollars that are unclaimed? Because I was told that it can't be returned to to its rightful owner more than I think like the previous year. And so it makes me question like where do those dollars go and why can't people claim them later on, similar to the unclaimed property program that exists through the state.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Yang. For the property tax refunds, there's 3 years to claim them. So the deadline for claiming the current refund has passed. However, it was on. So the deadline for claiming the 2020 refund was August 16th. However, residents can the drop dead date for filing is August of next year. So there's a 3-year period that people can file. So they can look back for a short period. But then if refunds are unclaimed, the money stays in the state general fund.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so just real quickly talking about the various types of the property tax refund. There's the regular refund, which is based on income and property taxes. There's a household income of threshold of $116,000 with a maximum refund of approximately $2,800. There's the renter refund. A portion of your renter's rent is used to pay property taxes, and so they qualify depending upon their income and rent paid. The maximum household income for that refund is $62,960 with a maximum refund of $2,200. And then finally, like we already discussed, there's the special property tax refund that isn't based on income, and it's based solely on the amount that your property taxes have increased. So with that, I will turn it back over to Director Rosario.
Thank you. This slide, I just really wanted to show that new development is strong and it's continued. We had a pause on some development projects last year, but we actually saw a 3.5% increase in growth in 2020 with new construction added improvements. Went from 507 million to 760 million. So the Alliance Fields Super Block is proceeding. Some additional demo work I think started like last week or a week and a half. Downtown St. Paul, the Osborne 370 is now, I believe it's like 85% leased out with a large amount of space by tech companies. Highland Bridge development is moving forward with numerous, I think it's the row houses that started, the row condo houses. And there's just numerous apartment projects throughout the county. And a future redevelopment and initial marketing phases, the downtown River's Edge and Hillcrest redevelopment are some examples. Next slide.
Just pausing you there for just one moment,
Sure.
Mr. Rosario. I just really appreciate your bringing that slide to our attention. It's something that we've been talking about a bit on the council as well about, we've done a ton of investing without subsidies and without TIF in the city and have been curious what our the growth has been, and because when we're not always figuring that in when we're talking about what a levy increase might look like if we have our tax capacity has also increased due to these investments and due to, when I'm looking at this, there's definitely projects on your list, and I realize this is just a snapshot and probably geared towards St. Paul, but there's a lot of it's here in our city and a lot of it's growing in our city. So just recognizing that these investments do add to our tax capacity, which at the end of the day should reduce overall tax burden. Although at the same time, we know that when we add people, we add the need for services. So sometimes ideally it reduces the demand, but at least it can keep it leveled out. So I just want to appreciate this slide and the calling out of that increase in our tax capacity.
All right, thank you. So this is just going over the summary here. So Ramsey County's aggregate estimated market value is really at all-time high at 62.2 billion. Again, that's the values were set as of January 2nd, 2021, using market data from 2020. Most areas of concentrated poverty are seeing some recovery from the 2007 Great Recession, and these areas are also seeing the highest increase in value in 2021 due to the affordable housing stock. Continued growth, strong growth for residential market is due to the really low supply of homes, the strong market demand, and historically low interest rates. However, the affordability gap continues to widen. Development, as we talked about in a previous slide, continues throughout Ramsey County post-pandemic, and the economic outlook remains solid for most real estate segments and uncertain for others as the economy emerges from the pandemic. Industrial is one of the strongest market segments going into 2021. While the industrial market was strong prior to the pandemic, it got stronger during it. Much of this market success is due to the continued growth of e-commerce and the need for warehouse distribution space. Ramsey County apartment market remains solid. However, there were some signs of softening due to the economic effects of the pandemic, with some areas experiencing rising vacancy rates. However, the number of people living in downtown continues to increase, and more apartment complexes are being built, like Arlo, the Donegan, and the Gallery of St. Paul. There's been about a 112% increase in the number of people living in downtown since 2010. Certain retail segments remain resilient despite the acceleration of e-commerce. The service sector of retail struggled the most during the pandemic and has rebounded rapidly since the onset of the mass vaccination. But many sectors of the retail did well throughout the pandemic and continue to do so. Restaurants have rebounded well in the last few months, but the pandemic really took its toll on them, upward to 10 to 15% going out of business. And hotels, really the question for hotels at this point is, will that business travel return? That really remains unknown for us going into the next assessment. And finally, I just want to touch on office, the possibility of a long-term shift to remote work for some employees could reduce the need for office space. Whether the Ramsey County office market is on this path is really unclear at this point. Because there's a lack of market activity, both in new leases and property sales. The level of possible market contraction is entirely unknown at this point. But it does seem like since the pandemic started, local vacancy rates have increased just a little, and new lease deals seem similar to pre-pandemic deals. And I'll pass it all back over to Director Bessler.
Thanks, Luis. So moving to the property tax side of the world, we'll start with the year that we're in right now, the taxes payable for 2021. And this slide shows the 3-year first half collection trend. So looking at this 3-year trend, first half collections for payable 2021 are strong. And this is consistent with what we've seen in prior recessions. Looking at the property tax delinquency trends right now for our trend right now, our delinquency rate is in line with the 10-year trend. This is something we'll be keeping an eye on, though, as the eviction moratorium is lifted and the foreclosure moratorium is lifted. We'll be keeping an eye on second half collections to see if that change in policy affects collections. But generally, this chart enforces that property taxes remain a reliable revenue source regardless of economic issues. But it's important to remember that just looking at property tax collections alone isn't a measure of distress that residents are possibly feeling. So then moving to the fiscal disparity distribution levy for this upcoming pay year for pay 2022. Before I get into sort of the weeds on the fiscal disparity levy, I just want to give a really high level overview of what fiscal disparities is. It's a complicated program that a lot of people aren't familiar with. This program was created in 1971, and what it is it's a program that shares the taxes on commercial industrial value growth throughout the 7-county metro. And just to give you a really quick idea of the scope of this program, the fiscal disparity program shared $500 million in tax base for taxes payable in 2021. This represents 10% of the total tax base for the 7-county metro area, and it equates to $697 million in tax revenue shared for payable 2021. So then looking locally at the city, the county, and the school district, we see that the city and the county are receiving a reduction in fiscal disparity distribution this year, and the school district is seeing an increase. To give you an idea of what this reduction relates to is for a reduction in the fiscal disparity levy can be thought of as increasing the levy. So like for the county, it can be thought of increasing the county levy by the $345,000. And to put that in understandable terms, what that means is that for a median valued home in St. Paul, it equates to about $1 worth of property tax. For the city of St. Paul decrease, it's like increasing the levy by $860,000, and that is approximately equivalent to $6 worth of property tax.
And I see we have a question. As I recall, though, last year we got a fairly significant increase in fiscal disparities. Is that correct?
Council President, yes. Last year, I believe all 3 entities saw increases in their distribution.
Okay. It's interestingly volatile, and it's almost like worth looking at over the course of time. Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. I'm just wondering why St. Paul schools would see an increase when the city and the county would see a decrease in fiscal disparities, if it's sort of a 7-county metro distribution back and forth between the cities.
Councilmember Naker, without getting too far into the weeds, there's a couple key factors. The first of which is when we look at the contribution amount that goes towards calculating the ultimate fiscal disparity distribution, there's a 1-year lag in it. So it's looking at the growth from the year previous. And there was a very, a large growth in value that we saw in that previous year. And then, so the reason why that's important is because tax rates have been dropping because values have been increasing so much. And because the county and the city stayed at a 0% change in levy, that, the tax base increased, rates decreased. And so the combination of the increase in contribution and the decreasing rates is what led to the city and the county receiving a decrease in their distribution.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So then moving to the next slide, we're moving into the next few slides will be the models that depict what property taxes will be doing based on the proposed levy so far that we've received. But just to give those at home a high-level overview of where we're at in the process, property taxes are a 2-year cycle. We're still in that first year. Values are finalized, as Director Rosario talked about. Taxing jurisdictions are looking at setting their preliminary levies coming up at the end of September. The estimates that I'll be talking about are based on these preliminary levies. Homeowners will receive their parcel-specific notice for estimated taxes in November. And then at the end of this first year, taxing jurisdictions set their final budgets and levies. And then homeowners in the second year, homeowners will receive their finalized property tax statement in March. So then moving to the model on the slide that I have displayed, this models taxes for a median valued residential property for St. Paul. The increase down at the bottom, it says that it's assuming a 6% increase in estimated market value. This increase equates to the increase as determined by the county assessor's office. At the bottom of the slide are the levy assumptions that are going into this model. And so right now, the county manager has announced his proposed budget. The mayor announced his proposed budget. And so we have all of the components except for the school district levy. That is released by Minnesota Department of Education, and it's still a little bit too early to have those numbers. So there isn't, so we're using the levy from last year for this estimate for the school district. So at the top of the slide, it shows that this last year for final payable 2021 taxes, a median valued single family home in St. Paul was at $215,800 this year. It's at $228,700. The top part, or this third box here, is the first part of the tax shifts that we're modeling. So these are the shifts that are unrelated to the levy changes that are down here at the bottom. And so the three main sort of buckets of shifts that aren't related to levies is the gain or decrease in fiscal disparity dollars, a change in homestead exclusion benefit for a homesteaded residential property, and then other shifts. The other shifts are the value, so where the value for residential properties, if they've shifted, if they're paying a larger or smaller portion of the levy compared to the other classifications. So then the next section below that is related to the shifts for the levy changes. And so you'll see all the taxing jurisdictions listed out here. The county HRA is levying for the first time in pay 2022, and that's included in the other special taxing districts line. And so then to the right of this, you'll see a box indicating what the taxpayer will see on their proposed truth in taxation notice. And so this taxpayer would see a $291 increase in property taxes, or a 9.5% increase over the previous year's taxes.
Not including the school district.
Correct. So this next slide shows the same thing, but for a median valued apartment property in the city of St. Paul. Again, this one assumes a much smaller value increase, just less than 1% value increase, which is reflective of what Director Rosario talked about previously. And so this apartment will see a reduction in property taxes due to shifts unrelated to levies. They'll see an increase in taxes related to levies, and ultimately they'll see a $570 increase, or a 3% increase in their property taxes over last year.
Ms. Naker has a question.
Thanks, Council President. Just want to clarify that is an apartment building, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Otherwise it would be a condo.
The apartment, and I was having a heart attack. Okay.
No, yes, thank you for that clarification. Yes, this is on an apartment building in St. Paul, not a single unit. So then this last model slide is for a median valued commercial property located in the city of St. Paul. The decrease, this is assuming a decrease in value. Commercial properties are relatively flat in value increases. And in fact, a lot of them decreased. And so this one did in fact decrease slightly. You'll see that there is a reduction in property taxes due to value shifts and fiscal disparity shifts, increase in taxes due to levy, and then ultimately this property would see a decrease in property taxes, so a 2.2% decrease in our taxes. This slide shows residential properties by St. Paul Planning District. It depicts the median estimated market value changes year over year, and then what the property taxes would do for those median valued residential properties. You'll see that all of them are seeing tax increases, and 5 of the districts are seeing increases above 10%, as Director Rosario talked about previously. The 5 districts seeing increases above 10% are Sunray, the Greater East Side, Dayton's Bluff, Payne Phelan, and North End. And then just a reminder for those that would be in Dayton's Bluff or Payne Phelan, that they would, if they're seeing a average increase above 12%, and so they would be eligible for that special property tax refund.
Ms. Bessler, this might be too in the weeds, and you can tell me that, and we can dig into it later. But I am trying to understand how we contemplate the 3.5% tax capacity growth, juxtaposed against what this estimated property taxes are. I mean, is there any sort of way to anticipate the larger tax base when we're looking at these? Is that included in the calculation?
Council President Brenmoen, would you be able to elaborate a little bit more on that? Otherwise, I'd be happy to talk offline with you on this too. But any other clarification on your question, I'd be happy to answer it.
Well, I'm just trying to understand if we have increased tax capacity because of developments that have happened in the city. Wouldn't that have an impact on even if property taxes increased or the levy increased a certain percentage? Wouldn't some of that be offset by the increase of the base?
I see. Yeah, Council Member President, with the tax base growth, yes, if the tax base growth isn't captured by TIF, then that would be an offset to the effect that that an increase of property tax levy has. And so, for example, in years where there are districts that are decertifying, there's that year where the value is coming back, that captured value is coming back on. And in those years, that captured value coming back on is a direct offset to the levy.
And is that contemplated in these calculations, was my question. Like when those come back online, or when these developments are added, is that I realize that it's hard for us to figure that into this proposed snapshot of what a levy increase could look like. And I'm just trying to understand if that increased base and capacity is included when we do these calculations.
These calculations take the tax base as it is at the time. And
okay.
So, yep.
Okay, that's what I'm wondering. So it's maybe not even quite accurate. It's just the best we can do.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, for sure, it's an estimate. But that is just something that I've been really trying to wrap my head around, because I know, I mean, many of the developments we've done have been done without any subsidy whatsoever. Some of them have used other, LCDA or tax, low-income housing tax credit, et cetera, but many will be on the tax rolls. So I'll be very interested to see how it will help offset any proposed increases. So I was wondering if it was already contemplated. It sounds like, nope, it is not. All right.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yep.
And I am sorry to go on the weeds, sir, but that's something that that's where my head's at this year. I know Ms. Naker and I have talked about it, like, again, at the high nerd level many times this year already. I'm looking at her smiling, so I know.
Happy to answer your questions. Yeah.
Okay,
Yep. The next two slides, and the last two slides show the famous friends from the city of St. Paul. These are the residential and commercial properties that I believe we've been following for many, many years. You'll see that a couple of the properties, the higher value properties, are seeing a decrease in property taxes, whereas some of the lower value properties are seeing, especially this 1971 Hawthorne. It's in one of those 5 areas that has the higher growth rate. And so they're seeing a larger increase in their property taxes. And then the last slide is the famous Friends, the commercial properties that we've been following. And you'll see that all Mama's Pizza is the only one that is seeing a small property tax increase, and the rest will be seeing a decrease in this estimate. And with that, that is our final slides. There's additional information in the appendix. I included models from all the other cities, the Ramsey County cities, if you are interested in seeing those. And then there's a glossary of any terms that myself or Director Rosario may have referenced today. So thank you very much for having us. It's a pleasure to be here, and we're happy to answer any additional questions there may be.
all right, thank you. Well done. I am looking to see if my colleagues have hands up. Any other questions? I know we kind of popped them your way throughout the presentation, so we may have taken care of our outstanding questions for now. Yep, looks like it. So Ms. Bessler, Mr. Rosario, thank you so much for this information. We may come back to you with more questions as we go through this journey, but it's always a great way to level set as we deal with our half of the budget process. So thank you very much for being here, and we'll wait anxiously for our presentation a year from now in the meantime. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 15 is Resolution 21-1275, honoring the life and public service of Chuck Repke Jr.
Right, and I am looking to Mrs. Nicker to take the helm on this one.
Thank you, Council President. I am honored to be able to read this resolution on behalf of the entire council in honor and memory of my constituent, my mentor, and my dear friend, Chuck Repke, who I dearly miss. I want to thank Marcia Mormond for taking the lead as staff on writing this resolution. I know assisted by Chuck's wonderful wife, Gloria Bogan, and others. And I just want to say before I read it that I am sitting in the room in which Chuck did so much of his productive work in the Ward 2 office. And so I have to believe that by reading it out loud right here, hopefully Chuck is with us in spirit listening in. So this is honoring the life and public service of Charles Chuck Repke Jr. Whereas with the recent passing of Charles Chuck Repke Jr., the city of St. Paul lost one of its most active and civic-minded citizens whose innumerable efforts to improve the city and the lives of its residents span nearly 50 years. And whereas in those 50 years of service, Chuck has held many titles, not the least of which include neighborhood activist, district council board president, planning commissioner, Ward 2 city council legislative aide, city charter commissioner, lobbyist, district council executive director, and community development corporation executive director. And whereas of all those titles, the most dear to Chuck were husband and best friend of Gloria, father of CJ and Matt, grandfather to Angel, Claudia, and Christine, and friend and mentor to many more than can be counted, including, I know, many of us here. And whereas prior to Chuck's joining the St. Paul City Council team as former Council President Dave Thune's legislative aide, Chuck honed his skills working on many community issues, including residents to protest 35E and the fight against storefront prostitution in the guise of saunas and rap parlors populating our neighborhoods. And whereas in the 8 years Chuck served as former Council President Dave Thune's legislative aide, he set the bar very high for all legislative aides who followed, as he was a master of the local political and governmental world, understanding the strategies, logistics, and partnerships necessary to envision the important projects which needed to occur and bringing the skills to succeed in executing them. And whereas the projects Dave and Chuck worked on over the years reflected their unwavering commitment to quality of life for all St. Paul residents, most notably the reinstatement of a meaningful human rights ordinance covering LGBT people, housing redevelopment and construction benefiting the owners and renters in long neglected areas of Ward 2, bringing the Minnesota Wild to St. Paul and passing ordinances regulating and eliminating nuisance businesses from the neighborhoods. And whereas following Chuck's public service at the St. Paul City Council, he continued his civic efforts, this time on the east side of St. Paul, guiding, shaping, and bringing to fruition a wide variety of projects, such as the Cub Foods at Phelan Village, the very first LEED Gold grocery store and catalyst for the full development of Phelan Village, a shopping center serving northeast neighborhoods of St. Paul with a bank, 2 grocery stores, a drugstore, medical clinics, restaurants, and other businesses, and bringing numerous housing developments serving all income levels to the neighborhood. And whereas Chuck also played critical roles in many projects throughout the city in helping others to navigate the codes, policies, rules, and regulations of St. Paul city government, such as the redevelopment of Cleveland Circle following the fire, the advent of outdoor dining in the Mears Park area, and the ongoing redevelopment of the old Shalom Home complex in the Midway, and the rehabilitation of the catering building of the Residence Inn at 200 Grand Avenue by the Hope Breakfast Bar. And whereas throughout his life, Chuck was guided in all his work by empathy and a stalwart commitment to those needing advocacy and representation in the halls of city government, balancing the hopes and needs of St. Paul neighbors and businesses, striving for the best outcomes for all. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the St. Paul City Council remembers, salutes, and humbly thanks Chuck Repke, a respected and trusted member of the St. Paul City Council family, for his 5 decades of service to the people of St. Paul. And be it further resolved that the St. Paul City Council hereby declares Wednesday, September 1st, 2021, Chuck Repke Day in the city of St. Paul. And I would just like to close by saying, on a personal note, one of the things that I respected so much about Chuck and that I will miss so much is the fact that he not only knew how politics is done, but he always remembered why politics is done. And he always considered it a noble calling, and never lost sight of the people that we're here to serve. So I miss him very much. I'm glad we were able to honor him here.
Thank you, Ms. Naker. And this is a beautiful, I think, just seconding your appreciation to Ms. Mormon for writing this beautiful resolution in concert with Ms. Bogan and family. It's really, the first time I read it, I was like, oh boy, what a sweet homage to Mr. Repke. I see Mr. Tao and Ms. Yang have hands up. Mr. Tao?
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Councilmember Necker, for bringing this forward, and the rest of the council. You know, Chuck is someone, it is a big loss for the city of St. Paul, and we've lost a lot of good people over the last couple of years here with the pandemic and everything, and it was really hard. And Chuck was always honest and transparent about the struggle that he was going through on social media, and it didn't matter how many prayers you sent out there. When his time came and he left us, and couple things I'll miss about Chuck is that he was always fair. He would come in, and when he played the role as your mentor, he would mentor you. He would be transparent. He would tell you how things was gonna go down, and then when he came in as a lobbyist, he tell you that this is what he was gonna do, and he explained his position, and then he looks at you. You don't say anything. He said, "But I understand. You still gonna do what you gotta do," and he even give you the analysis of how you were thinking too. And so it make you feel that he understands you, and that it wasn't personal, and that he knew that you had a difficult decision to make. And because he, like Councilmember Necker said, he's been doing this for years, and so he knows our heart, he knows our soul and how we care for the city. But and we still have to make those tough decisions. He cares about communities of color. He put a lot of time and energy in the east side and the north end. Him and his Mustang, and when I found out he was driving a Mustang, I convertible, I figure, you know, he must have been pretty wild when he was young, and maybe someday I'll get a convertible too, and I might not reach the paddle, but you know, hopefully they can adjust the seat. But he would be missed. I really, and even at the DFL convention, he was a true DFLer. He was always transparent at the convention, making sure that he took the time to explain how the process worked and putting everything on hold. He didn't care what people think. We lost a good person. He's going to be missed and every day.
Thank you, Mr. Tao. Ms. Yang.
Thanks, Council President. I still remember when I got the email from Lisa about Chuck's passing, and it was something that I feel like it left a really big hole in my heart because he is somebody who is such a well-respected community leader, not just like in St. Paul, but especially in the East Side, and really drove so many projects and business quarters that we have right now that are booming and doing really well and providing so many services for all of our families who are struggling, in the East Side here. And I think that, what I will always hold in my heart is how he really built a legacy where he lived, everywhere he went. And so many of us benefit from his legacy today, and we have a lot of work to do. He left us during a pandemic, and I'm sure that if he could, he would still be here fighting alongside us to make the city, an even better place for everyone to be able to live. And so I feel like Chuck is somebody who I was able to go to, and I could always expect something that was truthful. I could always expect honesty and transparency in him. And so we did lose a very, very great community leader and someone who was a trailblazer as well. And so I'm holding him and his family in my heart and hoping that they find a healing and peace during this time. So this was a very heartfelt resolution. And I'm very proud to be able to co-sponsor it in memory of Chuck.
Thank you, Ms. Yang. Mr. Tolbert.
Yeah, thank you very much. And what a wonderful resolution as a small recognition of Chuck's life. I'm probably repeating a lot of what other people said, but it's true. Chuck was a great person, a great activist, a great lobbyist. He always counted his votes. I know he did that. He was very adamant about counting his votes. And ultimately, he was a zealous advocate. And no matter what side he was on, he was the epitome of a zealous advocate. And I often tell people who approach me about running for office, I ask them what they like doing and how they like working on things or what their preferences are. And I tell people often that you don't necessarily need to be elected to make big changes, big policy changes, or to implement huge changes. And I think Chuck is the epitome of that. He made some very big changes for the betterment of St. Paul. This city there are littered is a negative word, but littered with his projects and things that he was involved with. And I think that's the epitome of what you can do. You don't necessarily need an election certificate to do that. And I often tell people sometimes too that, and this is the Bobby Kennedy that was working for his brother who was the president, but sometimes you need to be a Bobby Kennedy. And Chuck never had a problem being that person, being the tough guy, being very blunt and being strategic. And we usually don't talk about partisan politics on here, but I do think just because when I think of Chuck, I often think of DFL conventions, and I bet you there isn't a person sitting on this call who's been to a DFL convention who hasn't had the similar situation that I've had many times, and I can hear it. I can still hear it in my head of, Councilmember Tolbert, sit down and be quiet. When I was talking to somebody after the time everyone was supposed to be voting or something like that, and I'd look up at him, and people who didn't know Chuck would just gasp, and I'd look up at him, and he has a twinkle in his eye with a stern face, and I knew it. I mean, you had to have that personality to run a convention of a couple hundred people, and it came from a good place. And once I knew Chuck, it just made me laugh. But I could hear him saying that to so many different people. And I think it's a badge of honor if you got told to sit down and be quiet by Chuck Repke at a DFL convention, because it means you were out there chit-chatting. But Chuck is just a wonderful person, just so hardworking, thorough. I feel fortunate to have known him, and Chuck and I, we often laughed. Our inside joke was, Chuck was pretty open. Was quit drinking at a point in his life, and I don't drink either. And during the expansion of liquor laws that I was the author of, Chuck was the lead on the charter commission, and we just laughed that two guys that don't drink were the ones expanding liquor laws across the city of St. Paul. We always thought that was kind of a funny little irony. So my best, and I've been thinking a lot about Gloria and all of Chuck's children and his grandchildren. He's just a wonderful person, and St. Paul, Minnesota, and our country is a better place because he got involved with politics, and we are lucky to have him here in St. Paul. So thank you all. I know he was away from his family during times to move St. Paul forward, and we're grateful for that, but you're in our hearts.
Thank you, Mr. Tolbert. Ms. Jalali?
Thanks. Have really enjoyed hearing from other people, and I don't know what more I could add. I think it's really clear that Chuck lived his life in a way where he was everywhere. He was a part of everything. He worked across generations of political leaders and community leaders, across neighborhoods, across geography, and he really helped make this city what it is. And so I'm just really grateful to have gotten to know him. I did not know when I first met him that he would become someone I call with random questions about insular processes, whether they're related to political parties or city bureaucracy. I don't think I grasped just the length of history and stories one person could tell and could share. But we're lucky because he was so willing to share that. He was so willing to just take a call from anyone, anytime, any place, across differences, across arguments and points of view. I really enjoyed the time that I got to share with him. I hope that that your entire family is heartened. I think it is really heartfelt, the way that we have been shaped around this table by one person. I've been thinking a lot of Chuck's family. This news just hit like a wall of bricks. It was really hard to take. So that's life sometimes. And I just feel grateful that there is so much to show for how one person poured out his. So thank you so much to everyone who helped make this resolution, and we'll keep up his work in all the things that we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jalali. Ms. Prince and then Mr. Toe.
Well, I won't repeat what's been said. I will say ditto. And I will also say again, to everyone's point, Marcia, who knew Chuck very well as well, did a phenomenal job writing that resolution. And I'll simply say, thank you, Chuck. We're gonna miss you, but I realize that there's a part of my brain that has been there for 25 or so years that is the what would Chuck do part of my brain, and he would come and fill that part of my brain, and now it's very well trained. So I expect that my what would Chuck do brain will continue to function because Chuck embedded so much knowledge and passion and creativity and knowledge and the code and all that stuff that he will live on in the city because he will live on in the city. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Prince. Mr. Tao.
Thank you, Council President. I think one thing that I forgot to mention was to thank Gloria and the family for sharing Chuck with us, because we all know that this work and doing the level quality work that Chuck does require a lot of time, a lot of energy away from the kids, the house, the family, the wife. And so thank you, Gloria, and the kids and the grandkids, and for your husband, your father, your grandfather with us. We really appreciate it, and his spirit will live in our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tao. And I'll just wrap up and share that I met Chuck when I first entered city politics, and that was through my advocacy for ranked choice voting. Instant runoff voting is what we called it at the time. And I met Chuck Chuck was like a bomb that blew up in my face. I was like, what? And he was very passionately opposed to ranked choice voting, and I was very passionately for it. And I was like, wow, this is intense. Um, but what I noticed is that he also, an issue was an issue for him, and that he could leave that the passion around an issue at the table and continue to move forward. And when I decided to run for office, I was frankly surprised to have Chuck reach out and support me and help me. He had to do so quietly. I was running against an incumbent, and now that secret's out of the bag, but he helped me out, gave me advice. I'm like looking at nods because I think we've all had those calls and those little like tips from Chuck. But I was like, gosh, this is a person who's really investing in relationships, looking at the long game, and somebody who I ultimately became somebody who I trusted very much and appreciated, to everyone's points, of his contributions to the city, and particularly some work he did in the past 5 or 6 years in the North End, that I feel was a continuation of that relationship. So I felt very honored to be mentored and nurtured by Chuck in the time that I've been on the council, in spite of our the way we met, the circumstances under which we met. But I think if there was one silver lining, that when the announcement of his passing came out, I realized just how many people he has been a mentor to. And just that investment is just goes so far. I mean, I knew a few people, but man, person after person, and I would say so many women, and so many women of color, were really where he prioritized his energy and efforts. And I really respect that. And I really appreciated listening or reading people's stories of how Chuck was a mentor and a support person in their quest for advocacy or political office or working in the party. And so he will be missed. And I really appreciate what Ms. Prince said about just we have him now here, and it's our responsibility to bring it forward. So tonight at Mancini's, starting in about 15 minutes and going till 9 o'clock, there is a celebration of a life well lived and a big legacy in the city of St. Paul. People who want to join us down there, I know we will be there, probably masked up, and sharing some thoughts about Chuck and reading the resolution that we will be passing here in just a second. So please feel free to come join us and honor Chuck Repke, who has been a part of this council family for, as the resolution says, for 5 decades. It's quite notable, and he will be missed. Our hearts are with the family as they celebrate this evening and recognize how much love and support is around Chuck beyond just what they may have thought. So it should be a good evening. With that, I will take the motion for this resolution from Ms. Naker. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tobert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item 16 is Resolution Public Hearing 21-187, ratifying the assessment for installation of a fire protection system as requested by Travis Temke for 754 Randolph Avenue.
And this public hearing has been held virtually. As such, Ms. Naker moves to close the public hearing and approve. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tobert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 17 is Resolution Public Hearing 21-224, approving the application of Big River Pizza for a sound level variance in order to present amplified music for Let There Be Songs to Fill the Air Sundays on September 26th and October 3rd at the St. Paul Farmers Market.
And this public hearing has been held virtually. As such, Ms. Naker moves to close the public hearing and approve. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tobert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Baker,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted.
Ms. Nicker moves suspension of the rules. Roll call.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Baker,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. Rules are suspended. Resolution 21-1305, affirming the extension of declaration of a local emergency issued August 31st, 2021 by Mayor Melvin Carter III.
All right, and this item is coming to us under suspension because the council needs to ratify this extension within 3 days after it has been signed. Therefore, it was signed on the 31st and brought forward to the council today. Is there any discussion on this item? Oh, right. Seeing none, Ms. Prince moves the resolution. Roll call.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Baker,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted.
And just to quickly state on the term or on the how this relates to city business is the intention of the council was to return to the council chambers following the Labor Day holiday. And with this extension, we will be continuing to meet virtually through the end of November. I will share that many council members and aides are back in our offices, recognizing that in order for our downtown to make a comeback, it needs folks downtown. Our restaurants are struggling and coffee shops are struggling. And so this isn't by no means saying that downtown is unsafe. We just have public hearings in our council chambers that are hard to manage in terms of masking and large groups of people. And so we feel at this time with the Delta variant being more of an unknown, that not having a public hearing where an unknown number of the public can enter an enclosed area is safer for our council members, our staff, and all. So we will continue to proceed the way we have with the virtual meetings, but encouraging the building will be is not closed, and downtown is safe and fine. We encourage people to come and support our businesses downtown as well. So just wanted to make sure that that was clear and that the council process has been extended as well as part of this emergency order.
Council President, we have a second suspension item.
Yeah, Ms. Jalali moves suspension of the rules. Roll call.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker.
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, none opposed. The rules are suspended. Resolution 21-1291, approving the expenditure of program dollars on housing expenses for Alyssa Franzmeyer, Beatrice Crow, Kara Komodo, and Maylee Wagner, returning VISTA members of St. Paul's VISTA program in an amount not to exceed $12,000.
And this item is coming to us under suspension for the necessity of timeliness of rent, and it was just an error in putting it into Legistar. It seemed important to pay the rent on time, so we brought it in under suspension. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, so moved by Mr. Tao. Roll call.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker.
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. The legislative hearing officer recommends adoption of the following resolutions as no objections to these recommendations were received. Item 19, RLH SAO 21-64, 887 Conway Street. Item 22, RLH TA 21-283, 854 Euclid Street. Item 23, RLH TA 21-320, 1011 Geranium Avenue East. Item 24, RLH SAO 21-63, 913 Johnson Parkway. Item 25, RLH TA 21-310, 678 LaFond Avenue. Item 27, RLH TA 21-341, 1162 Marshall Avenue. Item 28, RLH TA 21-276, 1211 Randolph Avenue. Item 29, RLH FCO 21-129, 1665 Rice Street. Item 30, RLH AR 21-72, Property Cleanup Services. And item 31, RLH AR 21-73, also Property Cleanup Services. And the motion would be to adopt these items.
So moved by Mr. Tolbert. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tobert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearings are closed and the resolutions are adopted. For the following items, no objection to the legislative and hearing officer's amended recommendations were received, and therefore she recommends amendment and adoptions of items 18, RLH TA 21-304, 554 Charles Avenue, item 21, RLH FCO 21-113, 710 DeSoto Street, and item 26, RLH TA 21-271, 1238 Marion Street. And again, the motion is to amend and adopt these items.
All right, so moved by Ms. Yang. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tobert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearings are closed and the resolutions are adopted as amended. For the following item, the legislative hearing officer's recommendation is contested and additional testimony from the appellant is in the record. Item 20, RLH VO 21-34, 283 Curtis Street East, and there is a staff report.
Welcome, Ms. Mormond.
Thank you, Council President Brenmo and council members. This is an appeal of an order to restore service and repair the sanitary sewer connecting the property to the city's main sewer line. As you know, sanitary sewer service is required as a basic facility necessary for human habitation under Chapter 34.11, subsection 4 of the city's legislative code. You need to be connected to sewer and water in accordance with the Minnesota Plumbing Code. Throughout the hearing, I considered testimony and information, and my finding is that the sanitary sewer is in a state of failure based on the communications of city staff that they've received from both the contractor, the owner, and the owner selected to the contractor who the owner selected to do the repair of the sewer line was who staff spoke with about the state of the repair at the time the contractor abandoned the project due to a dispute with the property owner. Notably, this testimony and the orders document that this situation has been in existence since at least April of this year. The owner variously contested the fact of the failure itself, its importance, its impact on life safety within the dwelling. The owner also contests the minutes of the hearing as being inaccurate and noted that some of the items that were submitted over the past couple of days, we were peppered with a lot of items over the past couple of days, that they weren't in your published record until this afternoon. There was quite a substantial amount of material that was immediately present for the council members to look at immediately after publication of the agenda last week. So you had, I would say, the lion's share of material in front of you at the time the agenda was originally published, but there were a few items that were forthcoming in the time since then. So I just point that out, that, and I have talked with a few of you about that. It was today that was actually made public. So we can talk a little bit about what that means. I would note that the owner characterized in the discussion a fractured relationship with her contractor, and her perception of the impact of the already signed contract on her inability to even fix the sewer line. With respect to the dispute of whether the condition of sewer failure exists, at one point in the hearing, the owner indicated that she was willing to have the private sanitary sewer line augured out and videoed to not only address the problem as she understood it, but also to provide evidence to the city. The sewer utility staff in turn offered to camera the line from the main sewer in the street into her property if they had her permission to enter her property. She did provide that permission in the course of the hearing, but within a day she withdrew that permission and didn't allow access on her property. To the best of my material, or to the best of my knowledge, no information has been received by my office or the sewer utility, which documents that the sewer line is operational. With respect to the dispute with the contractor, I would note and did note in the course of the hearing that this is a private legal matter to which the city is not a party. The city does provide lists of private contractors from whom a private property owner would select who they want to work with and execute a contract accordingly, but the city is not a signatory or there to do dispute resolution between the private contractor and the homeowner. In the course of the hearing, I did suggest that seeking private legal counsel would be appropriate, or perhaps using the dispute resolution center. The owner at the time of the hearing was not interested in pursuing the dispute resolution center, as she had had problems with them in a previous alternative dispute resolution situation. And that did not turn out as she would have liked. What I'm looking at here is a long-term problem at this property with a failed sewer. We're talking about all the things that come with a failed sewer line, and whether that is contamination of soil, potential sewer gases, backup, all kind. You get the idea. Sewer is central to life safety. I want to say that this is long-term and we don't have a clear pathway forward without her addressing getting a contractor in and how to deal with it. There's a strong parallel in my mind to a situation that occurred in Ward 7 with Shamrock Plaza, where there was a long-term failure and not a clear pathway forward on how to address it. And that did result in the necessity to order vacated that premise for this reason until the sewer problems had been addressed. Similar kind of actions are going on where a composting toilet as opposed to porta potties were in use and so on. So this is very similar to that. Because of the seriousness of this situation, the lack of a pathway forward over a lot of time, I did put a temporary decision on the record to deny the appeal and order vacated the premise pending review by the city council. If you wish to continue the matter, and you've had, I would say, the information in front of you for a while, but if you wish to, for example, compare the minutes in greater detail to the audio record, I would ask that you continue the order to vacate and continue to require that the property be vacated pending your conclusion on the property, because I think of the seriousness of the matter does justify that. So what my recommendation to the council is this denial of the appeal and to order the property vacated effective immediately. Again, if you wish to continue it, I would ask that you continue the vacate pending your final disposition of the matter.
Thank you, Ms. Mormond. Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. Thanks so much, Ms. Mormond. I think your presentation and the testimony we received in the record is pretty clear. And I think I assume that the utility would still be willing to do the videoing from the street to the property if the property owner were willing to allow that again?
My understanding is yes, the context that we were having the conversation in was that the owner would assume responsibility to auger out an area that had some roots in it, as well as some what was being described as dips in the line, which there's a number of explanations for that. But it would make sense that that augering would happen prior to the video work so that the camera didn't simply run into a dead end and not being able to do a proper diagnosis of what was happening in the line, that really both pieces need to happen in agreement and together to make it work.
So my inclination, Ms. Mormond, is to accept your recommendation, but because the date of vacation was August 27th, which was prior to today's date and the hearing, I'd like to extend that for a week to September 8th. So as to give the property owner time to, again, either submit video demonstrating that the line is not in failure or to vacate the property. So that would be my motion.
All right. Is there any discussion on that motion from Ms. Naker? All right. So seeing none, roll call.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao, Councilmember, are you there? You're on mute. We'll circle back. Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Councilmember Tao, Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
6 in favor, no opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted as amended.
All right. That brings us to the end of our meeting. Are there any is there any news or updates from the ward? I do want to remind people that per the holiday Monday next week, we do need to make sure our register items are approved this evening. We have to turn in our agenda early to the legal ledger. Any more interesting announcements than that? I knew no one could top that. Okay. All right. Well, seeing none, we've had a big day. And hopefully we'll see some folks at Mancini's to celebrate Chuck Repke. With nothing else ahead of us or before us, we will be adjourned. Thank you much.